without following the written standard of change, which allows the people the power to always know how government is supposed to work and what it's not supposed to do, what it's supposed to do. When Jefferson said, he said, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. And then he goes and says, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. Too often in America today, people believe that our rights come from governments. They don't realize that our rights precede government, and the only purpose for government's existence is to secure those rights.
So John Locke, who wrote The Rights of Man, and had a tremendous influence on the founding fathers, on many millions of people in America, and persuaded them that they had a right, they had certain natural rights, and that limited government was the way to go, and I think changed the world. I mean...
Well, they surveyed not just Locke. You got Locke, Algernon, Hobbes, Montesquieu. All of these people had a...
Hobbes and Montesquieu...
Well, but Montesquieu was where our founders got the understanding that separation of powers and the necessity of limited government. Now, Hobbes, I think Hobbes's value, okay? Hobbes's value is being the other side of the coin that helped impress upon them the value and the importance and the truth of Locke.
Well, I see only this value in Hobbes, that he proved or clearly stated, and I think truthfully stated, that no government is the law of the jungle, and we don't want that.
Right.
And so I agree with him on that.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's why I'm not an anarchist.
if John Adams said, if men were angels, we wouldn't need government. And that, I mean, that's the basic underlying factor is throughout the dawn of time, before government had a name, people came together as communities to help each other secure their property from people who would want to take it. Because it's all a matter of the right to secure your property from those in power who want to enslave you. And so what I'm trying to say is that without a survey of all of that perspective, the wisdom that guided and created our Constitution would not be possible.
So you were explaining to the students here that these real facts about Thomas Jefferson and Washington and how they treated their slaves and what was the context. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that, because that is one of the main ways in which they try to tear Washington and Jefferson down.
Well, first and foremost, you can't impose a cultural standard on a people who don't live in that culture. It's simply a matter of truth. And people have their own, every culture has its own bias, its own bigotry, its own problems to get over. Part of the problem that we had in the American colonies is that slavery was mandated by the British government. This is a documented fact. Virginia was trying to outlaw slavery as a colony, but was getting military and financial pushback from the British government. And our founders knew that without declaring independence from Great Britain, that they would never have the ability to end slavery on the American continent. So that was one of the driving forces of our Declaration of Independence, so that all men could be equally free. But they also realized, and you get this from the discussions they had, because this was a hotly contested issue. I think Madison even went back later in his years and said, in retrospect, I wish we had done things differently, but at the time, that was our only option. So what they tell us in their debates was the importance of securing the Union to the ending of slavery on the continent was essential. So unless they could secure a union, because at that time you have this big chunk of land, and you have separate now from July 2nd, 1776, you have 13 separate countries. And without forming a union, these countries would be left to maintain the importation of slaves to the continent. How are you going to control that? How are you going to end that? So by forming the union and giving the states who are economically and socially addicted to this Jefferson called it, Jefferson was an abolitionist, by the way. Washington was an abolitionist, and they were all just stuck in a cultural trap. And that they said that by creating this mechanism, they could end the evil of slave trade. But without having the union and bringing them all in, then there would be no way to end it. So they had to give a little for the long run.
So you were explaining that Jefferson, the way he treated his slaves, and Washington, they gave them property. They were kind of semi-slaves in a sense. That, I mean, they had a lot of the benefits